Welcome to Three Films and a Podcast, the show where destiny brought together three friends to enhance each other's cinematic journey by watching three new movies in a series of themed rounds. There is no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode, as all film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy!
All right, hello and welcome to Three Films and a Podcast. My name is Tyler Beck, and I will be your host for this episode. Now, if you've been here before, you know that typically I have some other people with me, and that is true for this episode, just as it always is. I'll be joined by my dear friends Ben Lawhorn and Matt Weiler. And also, if you're new here, thank you for joining us. This is a weird episode for you to come in blind to, but, bear with us. I think you'll get the idea here. Anyways, so what's going on here is when we originally recorded this episode, my audio, something happened to it. It got corrupted, and about the first half of the recording was unusable on my end. Matt and Ben are true professionals, not the amateur that I am, and they were able to record their audio and get it over. So everything they recorded is crystal clear and pristine, but mine's broken. So what I'm going to try to do here is just intro the episode and give my brief overall thoughts about the movie that we're watching. And then it's just going to jump into the way that we recorded it on the day of the recording. And then at a certain point, my audio does start to work. And so everything's going to be normal from there. So I'm going to intro real quick, and then we'll kind of just get right into the episode. But before I explain the theme of the round and why we chose the movie we did and why we chose this round, I just wanted to give a little bit of context on how it all came about. So there is a show called United Shades of America with a comedian named W. Kamau Bell. And this show kind of goes around the country and talks to people that live in marginalized communities or forgotten about communities or just straight up unknown communities in the United States of America, and sort of tells their story, tells their struggle, and shines a light on their people in these cultures. It's a really cool show. I really suggest you check it out. I believe CNN produced it. But anyways, there is an episode. It's season 3, episode 6 of United Shades of America that talks about a community of people that live on an island outside of South Carolina called the Gullah. So this is a community of people that are made up, unfortunately, of enslaved people from West African countries during the slave trade. There's a port on this island where this is where the slave ships landed. And so because of this, there was all sorts of people from West African countries and, people from the United States, from the colonies, wherever. They all sort of lived in this little hotbed, this little melting pot. And from this just confluence of all these different cultures and peoples and influences, a true standalone culture was created. And this is the Gullah people, that what we now know as the Gullah people. They have their own dialects, their own foods. They've had their own music, some of which has, made it into pop culture, the broader American pop culture. Like, for instance, the song Kumbaya, right? That's a Gullah song that was invented there. They talk about this on the episode. And I was just blown away that I'd never heard of this place. We hear about the slave trade. We hear about slavery in America. And obviously we know that, the shadow of American slavery has not left, well, frankly, the entire country, but certainly the American Southeast. But I personally had never heard of this community of people, despite the fact that, as put by W. Kamau Bell in the episode of United Shades of America, this is one of the original. This is maybe the original American culture, right? Like, it's something that's unique to the United States of America and is unfortunately sort of being, for lack of a better term, gentrified and pushed out of not only the region, but certainly, the American mindset, the history books, I guess you could say. I don't know. I struggle to talk about this because I don't know enough about it, but it's just a really fascinating topic and a really fascinating people. And during the episode of United Shades of America, W. Kamau Bell speaks to a woman named Julie Dash, who in 1991 released a movie called Daughters of the Dust. And this movie is the movie we're here to talk about. It was released through Sundance, and it was sort of a darling at Sundance. It was nominated for grand jury prizes and the like. And then eventually it was added to the Library of Congress National Film Registry. And this happened in 2004. So it's obvious. It seemed obvious to me that it was an important movie. It was something that I should see and something that I thought would be really cool to do for the podcast. And so I was looking forward to our schedule, and my round of selections, that my theme selection happened over February, which is of course Black History Month. And I figured, well, let's kick off this round in February with this movie, Daughters of the Dust, and let's watch a few other movies that are broadly broadly related to African American history or Black history in America, or frankly, American history, but just not from the specifically white perspective that we typically see our own history. So, anyways, this episode is going to pick right up here with Ben's overall thoughts of the movie. It's going to kick over to Matt's overall thoughts of the movie. And to be honest, my thoughts more or less mirror theirs, so you don't really need to hear mine. But I will say I'm really, really glad I watched this. I hope if you, by this point, haven't seen this movie, go check it out before you listen to this episode. I think it obviously makes all of our episodes better to have seen the movie, but this one in particular. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Ben. You'll hear from Matt. And then from there on out, it'll be more or less a normal episode. So thanks for sticking with us, and I hope you guys enjoy the show.
I had never heard of this movie at all. Yeah, I had no idea. Like when you suggested it, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like you were very motivated, I guess, maybe might be the word. It's like, I want to do this, and I know exactly what I want to talk about. I'm like, all right, cool, man. Like, let's do it, you know? So I was excited to have a movie like this, which, like you said, is essentially like the poster child for why we do this podcast. Like, never heard of it, never, it's about real people, all that kind of stuff. So I was super stoked that you picked this and that we're watching this. I'm excited to do this round. We have some other fun movies coming up. I guess it kind of
fun.
I feel like, well, not fun movies, I guess.
Let's watch just
that was a horrible word, I guess, for it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm curious if it'll switch up at all depending on how we nail down this theme. But as far as this movie is concerned, I feel like I don't know. I feel weird reviewing it because essentially, like it's a more important of a movie than it is like a movie that I enjoyed, if that makes sense. Like I knew while I was watching this, I'm like, this is amazing. Like what they're doing here, like the story they're telling, everything is wonderful. And I don't think it's just because of who I am versus who the story is about. Cause I feel like, I do my best to like try to tie myself into any protagonist, anything like that. I don't know. I was having a hard time with the movie overall, but again, it's something like as I'm watching this, it's like, I'm mad at myself for not like loving it. It's like, fuck, man, I feel like I should really be drawn into this. And for some reason, it's just like, it's missing the mark on me. But at the same time, like, it's just like, I know it's good. I know this is, more importantly, it's an important film. Like Julie Dash, like what she accomplished was amazing. This was one of the funnest facts I think about this, is that this is the first feature film directed by an African-American woman ever distributed theatrically in the US. Like that's crazy. Also, it's nuts that like that was in 1991. Like it was like 30 years ago. Like that's insane. But again, like the first movie we ever talked about was Do the Right Thing, which was like not even 10 years earlier. And it's amazing the first thing that, some of the first that accomplished, like it's absurd. So again, like this is a super important movie. I'm glad it was made. Like I thought the story was very interesting. I appreciated like the dialect and the way that they were speaking there and just like sticking true to who they were and not, whitewashing it. I think, a lesser director may have like, no, let's dumb it down. Like, let's make sure everyone can completely understand it. Like, let's, whatever, give the version of footnotes, like, oh, this means that, whatever.
Right.
So I appreciated that it just like, it stuck to its truth, I just like was bummed that I just didn't get wrapped up in it, as much as I wanted to, but is beautiful to look at. I mean, I'll talk more about some of that stuff later on, but like obviously the cinematography is great. You know, I watched some of the YouTube behind the scenes stuff, like with Julie Dash talking about the costumes, and it's like hearing her talk about it and then seeing it's like, oh yeah, I mean, that is so cool. Like, I think maybe if I had seen this, you know, United Shades of America episode beforehand, I might have had more of like a, you know, attachment to it, having known like the real story, you know, behind it and then going into it. But just going right into it as the film itself, it was just like, I appreciate this is really well done. Unfortunately, it's not for me. I don't mean this in like a weird way at all, but it's kind of like how I feel about Bruce Springsteen. Like, I understand that there's talent there and that a lot of people love this, and on the surface, like, I should enjoy this, but it's just not for me. You know what I mean? But that's maybe one of the worst things I could say about this movie. I really don't mean that in a horrible way. It's just trying to make an analogy of like when I know something is like objectively good, but it didn't hit me, unfortunately. But I'm glad that we watched it, to say the very least.
We just lost 3,000 followers over the Bruce
Springsteen. We did. All of New Jersey is gone.
I mean, I totally get that. This was an interesting watch. I'm going to reiterate what Tyler and Ben both said, in that this is a perfect movie for this podcast. I'm glad that we mentioned like why this movie was important, like some of the important things around it. And it was clear watching it. It was clear, as you said, Ben, like objectively, like you can tell why this was like very critically acclaimed, why it mattered. Well, at least I would have liked, Tyler, I know that one of your big goals was to have someone from the community on here to sort of discuss it with. And I feel like that's going to be a goal of ours, because three white dudes talking about these important pictures can only get us so far.
Really
but to the point of the podcast, like these things are still important to watch and still try to understand and still have that cultural experience. And so that's our invitation to everybody else, is check this movie out. To me, this struck me. We learned a fraction of the black side of American history growing up, especially in Utah. We just get a very glazed over slavery was bad and that's over and we're done with it and racism's gone. It's kind of how we were taught out here in Utah. We didn't have a lot of black people in our communities to prove that wrong. And we hear, I mean, even lately, we've unfortunately been on the news way too much in Utah about just how untrue, just how far we still have to go as a state and as a community. Anyways, that all to say, I greatly appreciated this view of this culture, this people, as part of American history, because that's what it is. We have, the black community has contributed so much to our pop culture, to our everyday life, that they don't even get credit for. And so just to see their roots and see glimpses of where they came from, and in these people's cases, like against their will, and their will to survive and their will to adapt and their will to create something powerful out of their circumstances, is just super inspiring. I agree with Ben. To me, the format was difficult. Like it was a rough, and I said this on my Letterboxd review, for anyone who wants a cultural historical experience, I highly recommend this movie. Like it's beautifully shot. It's very well done, very well acted. At times it felt like a documentary. Like it almost felt like you were watching a video of that people today, you know? Right. So it felt really great and authentic that way. But the nonlinear storytelling just made it hard to watch, a little bit hard to follow, harder to relate to things. And maybe there's some intention there that I'm missing, but for me, that's what made it more of a difficult watch from like a pleasure standpoint.
Can I speak to the dialect just real quick? It was like, Roger Ebert brought that up in his review. First, he called the film a tone poem, which I thought was kind of cool. But in his review, he talked about the dialect, the Gullah dialect. And he said, the fact that some of the dialogue is deliberately difficult is not frustrating, but comforting. We relax like children at a family picnic, not understanding everything, but feeling at home with the expression of it.
So,
That's
Hot
great.
take here, but Roger Ebert knows what he's talking about. And it's just like, yeah, I think he was able to put in those two sentences kind of what I stammered through for the first 5 minutes, where it's like, I didn't get it, but to some extent, like I didn't really care. Like it didn't like
Right.
the actual dialogue didn't necessarily matter as much as like the feeling of it. And it's almost to an extent like watching a foreign language film, something like that, where it's like, I don't even necessarily know what's happening, but so that there were those things that I enjoyed about it. Like I said, I was still just disappointed that I didn't like receive it, as much as I really wanted to. But to that point as well, just recently Sight and Sound released their greatest films of all time, which is selected by critics. They do it every 10 years. And this movie ended up at number 60, which is pretty huge, according to them, like the 60th best film of all time, which again, as I'm watching it and the importance of it, I'm like, yeah, I get it. That totally makes sense. So, I think all of this kind of stuff definitely spoke to those critics and people that view it. And like Matt said, like, if you're looking for anything, along those lines, like I think this is a good film for people to check out at least once for sure.
Yeah, and just to add to that point on the dialect, it totally brings you in, and it makes you feel like you said, Ben, or Roger Ebert, if you're out there, like and subscribe.
Please
from
like
heaven,
and subscribe.
from Film Heaven. No, I think that was one thing that worked really well for me was the sound design. Like you could hear the ocean the entire movie, and it was pretty loud too. Like you had to listen to the dialogue with the ocean in the background. A lot of just like the other like nature elements you could hear, like wind blowing, leaves like clapping against each other. That was part of what made it feel sort of documentary as well. But it made you feel like you're on part of the island. I feel like that's where it succeeds the most, is you feel like you're with this community for the entire duration of the movie, which is pretty impressive. Like it is something of an escape. It might be hard to follow at times. It's nonlinear, but at the very least, it's very effective in helping you feel like you're there.
Yeah, and it's probably a good thing that. So, okay, I was hoping to see like the whole community, right? Like I was hoping this would be a story about like the entire Gullah people, but it's not. It's about one family and one small portion of the community, which is better for the movie, right? Like it makes it feel more comfortable, like you guys are talking about, and you're able to sort of slow down and appreciate and just appreciate. It's just easier to have slow moments, right? And have it just be like we can hear the wind blowing through the trees and we can hear the waves crashing and we can just dance around in the sunset. And so I think it was all for the better that it was a smaller story. I guess I was just hoping to like take a tour of the entire island, and I don't know. But yeah, I honestly can't believe that it's on that list at number 60. Not because I don't think it deserves it, but it's just like you would have think that you think you would have heard of it, right? Like just like the island itself. Like it's just the fact that this has just been like under our noses the whole time is just crazy. So let's hop in the elevator real quick. Let's do some elevator pitches.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
If you're listening to this and you've never seen Daughters of the Dust, and you haven't been enticed to watch it now, we've got a little bit of time on this elevator. We've got a few minutes, and we're going to show you one scene from the movie to try and entice you to watch the movie. Ben, what would you choose for your elevator pitch?
I was really kind of captivated the most by one of the early scenes with Eli and Nana talking to each other, and he's kind of stressing out and you're trying to catch up to what it is he's talking about. And as I understand it correctly, his wife was raped by a white man on the mainland and she became pregnant, and he's just really stressing out about like what that means, I guess, like for their lineage, all that kind of stuff, And Nana, I believe she lost her husband, and just talking about how the family line kind of continues from the oldest to the new, like this will always continue. The stories continue within the family. But she's just said a line in there that really kind of hit me, even as a person who doesn't, necessarily find himself very religious or, too worried about anything along those lines. But hearing her say, man's power don't end with death. We just move on to another place. And I think, it says some lines of like looking over the family that's still living.
It's up to the living to keep in touch with the dead, Eli. Man's power don't end with death. We just move on to another place. A place where we go and watch over our living family.
I was like, oh, that's cool to move forward with that belief, within them, because she's able to kind of like say like, oh, this is, kind of what I feel like they would say or they're thinking or whatever. And it really strengthens their bond, because so much of this throughout the movie, they talk about like the stories only continue if they get passed down, like as long as everyone continues.
Right.
Like there's one part where a woman, I think she's trying to teach the kids like the words that she remembers, and she even says at one point, like, that's all I remember. I don't know, like that's it.
That's all my grandma taught me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, that's also the fear of these people. It's just like you risk losing your history and your heritage. Like obviously with all slavery, like so much of that stuff was lost just in general, like history only goes back so far. The genealogy only goes back so far for so many people, unfortunately. So it's just really interesting to hear how they, I don't say came to terms with it, but like how they continued their faith, of like, just because someone's not here physically doesn't mean they're not here with us. Just in a sense of trying to like calm Eli and things like that. So I was like, okay, cool. This is definitely like the matriarch. Also, she's the only one not in white. Like she has like a purple dress, which is kind of cool and noteworthy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I really liked her quite a bit. But that was probably like my favorite scene. It's pretty early on, but I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Yeah, speaking of the lack of genealogy or paperwork or anything, that's actually one of the big problems on the island right now, is because things were just passed down by hand, right? Like, or by word of mouth, like this is your house now, this is your property now. There's no paperwork. And so developers are able to go in there pretty easily and just basically take the property. I guess according to that episode I watched, what'll happen is a property or a home will be owned by a family, right? And a developer will get a hold of a member of that family. And since there's no paperwork, they can have that member of the family sign everything. They'll pay them a little bit of money, and then they take ownership of that property. And that's a lot of what that episode was about, is just, like you can see watching the movie how beautiful this area is. And so obviously, resorts and whatnot are trying to encroach their way onto the island. Such a bummer. This is so I watched this movie and then I watched Judas and the Black Messiah today, and the white guilt is just oozing out of my pores today. I'm like, what the fuck is anyway. Matthew, what would your elevator pitch be?
Mine would be, so there's a scene where so basically for those who haven't seen this movie, there's a group of people who came by boat to visit the island from the mainland, and some of them are relatives. One of them is named Yellow Mary, and she's kind of more of a free spirit, not at least throughout the story, she's not as closely tied to their roots and their customs and the things that she's kind of moved on in some ways. Anyway, there's the scene where she's there with her special friend, lounging in a tree, sharing a joint of sorts.
Yeah, I love this scene.
And they're just talking to Eola, and it's just cool because like the way it's depicted, it felt just like sort of like a normal conversation that relatives who haven't caught up in a while would have. It's not as like, I don't know. They're talking about deep things, but not in very like deep monologues, or not in no deep dialogue, just sort of like surface questions that cut deep, I should say. But you really get a sense of their relationship, the strong family bond there, the wisdom that's sort of shared back and forth. But more than anything, I really just loved the shots of the two women lounging in the tree, and her in her white dress, just sort of like looking on with them, and the way that the camera sort of told that exchange, and then it ends just sort of like from a different angle, like a beach shot of them just lounging in the tree, like looking off and over the sea, and that was just like such a cool scene to me. And that would be, what I'd whip out on my phone if I was trapped in an elevator with somebody.
Yeah, it was. There's a few shots like this, and I think we're going to talk about it later. But it was like that's straight out of a painting. You know what I mean? Like you could easily have seen up that painting hanging on a wall. That scene jumped out immediately to me. Then even before I saw that they were smoking a joint, because that just made me laugh so hard. That was incredible. But and it could have just been tobacco. Who knows? But I don't know. Just the second I saw that scene, it just. There's something about it. I honestly can't articulate it, but it was my runner-up for my elevator pitch as well, just because there was just something so honest and simple about that moment. But like you said, Matt, it was powerful. It was people catching up. They hadn't seen each other in a long time. This is Yellow Mary is a person who has sort of left her family and her culture and her traditions behind. She is a full-on mainlander, like she has dreams of going to Nova Scotia, for crying out loud, which also blew me away. I was like, Nova Scotia? Like, you couldn't get farther from the Gullah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that was one of my favorite scenes as well. The scene that I chose was it's a pretty quick moment, but Yellow Mary's talking about mainland and her adventures there, and the reasons why it's why she likes living in the cities and whatnot. And she brought some they're these little glasses, like magnifying glasses that you can hold up, and then you can look at a picture and it makes the picture large, like a children's toy from early 1900s. And these kids are looking through these little binoculars at these pictures, sort of like think kaleidoscope, but it's not crazy looking. It's just a normal picture. And they're looking at pictures of the city. There's just black and white street scenes of whatever city she was in the early 1900s. And that moment just hit me so hard, because I felt like it was a perfect encapsulation of the struggle of the community. Like, here's this weird technology, this weird toy depicting this civilization that is so monumentally different from where they live. I mean, they're still living in wooden shacks with chickens running around, and they're wearing, handmade clothing, and they're one of my favorite scenes is watching them cook dinner, but they're just like preparing dinner in the sand on the beach. You know what I mean? It's like very primitive, but very like specific and very like cultural, I guess, for the lack of a better word. And it's just so diametrically opposed to what these kids are looking at in the glasses. And to me, it just perfectly depicted the struggle of this community. Like, why wouldn't that be appealing? I think anyone would be drawn to this magical world outside of your own community, despite how much you might love it. These people have a lot of love for where they're from, and it's a big struggle throughout the movie, is this talk of moving to the mainland and abandoning your culture and abandoning your story and abandoning your people. But it's like these kids might as well be looking at pictures of Mars. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It really, really hit me. And it really also helped me get a sense of the time frame, right? Because you could have told me that these people were on this island at any time in history, and I would have to believe it. It could have been the 1800s for all I know. It looks exactly the same as what I would have pictured looking. So anyways, I just thought it was really cool. And I just thought it was a good way to show the struggle that the movie is going to be talking about and sort of the overall themes. And I just think that little toy is cool. It's just like so quaint and interesting to think back of, like, that's all it took. You could have a little 4x5 photo with some binoculars, and you could entertain a child for hours. I don't know. I thought it was just a really interesting and kind of cool small scene to set up the rest of the story. Well, speaking of cool pictures, I want to try and do a new segment on the podcast. I just kind of want to appreciate the cinematography of the movie. There was so many moments throughout the movie where I had thought to myself, like, oh, I could hang that on my wall, or I could pop that out and hang it on my wall. And so I was just curious. I have a handful of moments that I wrote down. Was curious if you guys had any specific scenes or specific shots, snapshots in the movie that stuck out to you. Matthew, did you have anything here?
Yeah, I'll name a few. I mentioned the one in the tree. There's a few great shots just of that scene alone. I thought the scenes of like the Bible study on the beach was pretty striking, as well as that sort of like found umbrella and sort of their interaction with like that found umbrella on the beach are three that come to mind specifically.
I love the way that they sit together, those women. Like they are just like one ball of person. They're just wrapped around each other. It's like so cuddly and just so intimate and sweet, and just loving. I don't know. I thought that was really cool. And again, that was another like Renaissance painting moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the tattered parasol with these women in their the beautiful dresses they're wearing, sitting on the beach, just snuggled up, braiding each other's hair or whatever they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
It was really cool. Yeah, that's a good one. What shot stuck out to you, Ben?
Honestly, again, like towards the beginning, I really like seeing them come down the river. I think it was just kind of the contrast of, just a very well put together woman, and her partner with her, whatever. Then just, kind of the setting that they're in. It's like, well, this doesn't seem natural, like this doesn't seem like it goes together at all. And I think it was just very striking. So, it's another kind of movie where it's just like it can hook you in with the visuals at the beginning. It's like, okay, I don't know where this is going, but like this is very cool looking. I kind of want to see what's going to happen here. With them for a bit as they cruise down the river and stuff. So I just liked any of those visuals, just like the contrast of kind of the swampy river, whatever, and then just these very well put together people in the boat going down there.
And Yellow Mary looks so mysterious and cool.
Yeah,
she got
really
the veil
does.
down. It's like, I was like, who's this? Like, who is this woman coming down the river to visit the Gullah? I think this episode is really funny for our audio enjoyers. Not this episode, this segment. This is kind of cracking me up. So this is a really good example of why you should watch on YouTube or Spotify video, because I'm sure Ben will have put some effort into this segment to try and put these visuals on screen for you. But I had a handful of them. Again, like I said, it was about every 10 minutes. I was like, oh, I could put that on the wall. There's a shot of Nana Pazant towards the middle of the movie. I don't know if you remember this, but she's sitting on a chair looking out towards the ocean. The camera's behind her and she's sort of silhouetted against the sunset. Mm-hmm. And then she stands up and walks towards the ocean and is just watching everyone interacting on the beach. And it just is a really beautifully composed and it's just a beautiful shot. The composition's really cool. And I could easily see that being as part of a photojournalism piece, right? Like someone goes and hangs out with the Gullah people and brings back that shot. It could easily have been a cover shot. A similar one is there is 4 women sitting where the camera's behind them. They're silhouetted against the sunset, and one of them's pointing off to the distance. They're talking. We don't hear what they're saying. Again, it's one of those moments where we can just hear the ocean and we can just see the clouds moving by. Really beautiful. There was a shot where Eli appears to be walking on water as Eula is telling the story of the slaves that were brought over and walked themselves back into the ocean and walked on water and disappeared. Mm-hmm. And as she's telling that story, Eli is walking on the waters of the swamp, or at least it appears to be. And I thought that was really cool. Yeah. And it looked awesome. And then the moment where everyone's sitting on the beach, on the hillside, eating the feast that has been prepared. That was like, I mean, I've said it a couple of times, but talk about a Renaissance painting moment. Like, you could pause that at any moment and it just was like, I don't know, it was so well framed and composed and blocked. Like the way they had everyone sitting, it looked natural, but also just perfect. And I don't know, that was really cool. Julie Dash, I'd be curious to see some more of her stuff because she has a real way with the camera. Like she knows where she puts the camera is not like, I wouldn't say like, this isn't like meant to be a shot at her, but like, I wouldn't say anything was like crazy inventive, or I wasn't like, there wasn't any like clever camera movements, but everything was so meticulous and so well composed that it was just there's not a moment of this movie that's not beautiful. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of shout some of those out, and Ben, I put timestamps for all of those down. So
Appreciate that.
You can if you choose to. I'd hate to tell you how to do your job. Maybe we'll have the intern pull those still shots.
Yeah, they can do that.
Let's leave the island for a little bit. We need to go visit our buddy Adam. We haven't been to his drive-in for a minute. He's been bugging us. He misses us. We miss him. So we're going to head to Adam Driver's drive-in for his double feature.
I just had sex. I'm about to eat nachos. It's the greatest moment of my life.
And we're going to try to find a movie that pairs well with Daughters of the Dust for your dream double feature. And Ben, I would like to start with you.
I would love to start. Beehive Rise Up. We're going to do a Beyonce's Lemonade, actually. Okay. She takes a lot of inspiration from this movie. There's a lot of women like kind of in the same white outfits, a lot of the beach setting, things like that, to the point that, I pulled up on Wikipedia here, but the homage brought attention to the film in certain magazines, Vanity Fair, Rolling Stone, NPR, all that kind of stuff. But it brought enough attention to the point that Daughters of the Dust was re-released in November of that year that Lemonade came out, along with a new trailer and poster. I think that's the power of Beyonce, is
thanks, B.
Reference a movie from the 90s that people don't know about. And it's like, well, now I've got to see it, So yeah, I mean, that's what I want to go back and rewatch Lemonade, because as I was watching this movie, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I see what they did. Like, and that there's just some like beautiful, talk about great cinematography and stuff. Lemonade is definitely worth a watch, but now having watched Daughters of the Dust, like it'd be fun to go back and watch it again and just see. But, watch an interview with Julie Dash, who didn't know that's what was happening. And said just one day, like her phone blew up when Lemonade came out. And, some people, I guess, were like, are you mad or whatever? She's like, are you kidding me? No, like Beyonce's referencing my movie. Like, no, this is fine. This is great, So I just think it'd be a cool thing to watch. I'd put it second because I think it would, I feel like it will hit harder after having seen Daughters of the Dust. So I'm excited to watch that again. And that's what I would pick.
Well, shit. Let's wrap it up. I don't think there's a better answer than that. That genuinely sounds so cool. I would love that. That sounds like an actually really fun double feature.
Yeah.
But here to try and do better than that is my good friend Matt Weiler.
Top Beyonce, Matt.
Well, I've already failed. Gold member with Beyonce.
Oh my God.
Yeah, of course.
Geez. Let's see. I feel like while I was watching this, I was just reminded of being in 8th grade watching Roots, but I feel like Roots is kind of like the basic answer. Like, I don't know, almost like an eye roll answer. Like, okay, yeah, we get it. But if I were to think of, I don't know, I mentioned earlier in the episode about sort of the American influence of the Black, or the pop culture influence of the Black community, and how much they've contributed that they don't a lot of times get a credit for. Not that this movie shows a ton of that, but I think if I'm to shout something that came out recently, I would maybe pair this with Elvis, just because there's a particular sequence where they kind of lean heavier into the African American influences of Elvis's whole persona and some of the things that he sort of took that sort of like catapulted him into stardom.
Any way you do, yeah. Well, now, Mama, she done told me, Papa told me too. That if you live it, son, I won't be the death to you. Now that's all right. That's all right. That's all right now, Mama. Anyway.
And that's just one example of there. Pretty much all of rock and roll took from, Chuck Berry and Muddy Waters. Like, they were trailblazers in the music scene for sure, but so much of just like their worship, like in Elvis in particular, he's outside a gospel church, kind of seeing, their way of worship, and that sort of kind of influenced certain things. Not that that's actually, biographical, but it's depicted that way in the movie. And we get to see a little bit of, sort of a melting pot of of religious identity there just on that island. You see some Muslim prayers, you see some Christianity, you see some other, rites that were probably just straight from Africa. And so it's really interesting. And each one of those things kind of have their stamp in our culture with things that we see every day. And so I would just go ahead and show that, and then top it off with Elvis. Not that we need to see how, white men have taken from the black community, but it allows at least, white people to say like, hey, okay, we didn't invent everything. Like we thought that we did.
Well, I took a similar route, but like in a way more sinister way. Like I said, I watched Daughters yesterday, and then I watched Judas and the Black Messiah today. And so as I was trying to think of a movie to pair with this, I just really wanted to watch some bad things happen to slave owners and like racist people. And so I just want to watch Django Unchained.
Yeah,
that's a good pick.
We can put on Daughters first, and then we can watch Django. I just was like, I was not in a good mental state. After, I was just like, we don't need to get into a soapbox here, but I was honestly pretty depressed and bummed out. It's a tough double feature in real life to go from Daughters to Judas and the Black Messiah. So I might not be as negative now if I were picking, but when I picked it earlier, we're going to watch Django Unchained because I just want to watch bad things happen to bad people, specifically the oppressors. And so, yeah, on that very positive note, I'm really not too sure what else I can say about this movie. Like I said, I'm in a weird headspace. I need to go. I need to go watch something happy. The Jazz won, so that's fun. But nice. I don't know. I think this is as good a place to end it as any. I really do hope if you've listened to this episode and you haven't either A, heard of this community or this movie, and B, not seen this movie, please do check it out. Just because we might have struggled with parts of the movie or with the movie itself doesn't mean that you will. And that's what this whole podcast is about. We're trying to take in stories that we wouldn't otherwise have seen. Otherwise, I'll just watch New Girl and Community until I die. And that's no fun as much as I do love it. So, after you've gone and followed us on Twitter and Instagram and subscribed on YouTube, please do go check out this movie. It's really gorgeous. And I think it's really important that everyone does see it. So with that, I think we're going to sign off, and we'll catch you next time. Bye, everyone.
Yep.
Let's all go to Gullah Gullah Island. Gullah Gullah! Gullah Gullah!
Remember Gullah Gullah Island? The 90s kids show on Nick Jr. featuring a fun family and a pollywog named Binga Binga? Well, it's a real place. Kind of.
I'm Natalie Days, and I played Miss Natalie on Gullah Gullah Island.
My name is Ron Days, and I served as a dad.
Show me how old you are, Shana.
5.
There is no real place named Gullah Gullah Island except on TV. It is based on the Gullah Geechee culture, which was passed on by enslaved West Africans who were brought to this country